The clock on the nightstand read a few minutes past midnight when the knock came. Not the polite tap of a studio messenger, or the confident rap of someone expected. This was different, urgent, almost desperate, yet strangely hesitant. 3 quick strikes against the heavy wooden door of the Brentwood bungalow. She stood in the dim hallway, barefoot on cold tile, wrapped in white silk that caught the moonlight streaming through the curtains. Her hand trembled as it reached for the door handle. She knew, somehow she knew, that opening this door would change everything. That whatever waited on the other side carried with it the weight of all her hidden choices, all her whispered secrets, all the parts of herself Hollywood had tried so carefully to bury. The face that greeted her through the crack in the door was one she'd seen before, though never like this, never at this hour, never with that look in their eyes, fear mixed with something else. Determination, or perhaps desperation. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the empty house behind her, as if the shadows themselves might be listening. "I know," came the reply. "But there are things you need to know. Things they don't want you to know. But to understand how this moment came to be, we must go back to the beginning." Hollywood in its golden age was a factory of dreams, built on a foundation of secrets. The studio system operated like a beautiful, brutal machine, transforming ordinary people into gods and goddesses, but demanding everything in return: your time, your body, your truth, and most of all, your silence. She had become the most photographed woman in the world. Her image multiplied across magazine covers and movie screens, until the real woman beneath became harder and harder to find, even for herself. In public she was luminous, the embodied fantasy, the breathless voice, the knowing smile that promised everything while revealing nothing. In private, she was something else entirely. Those who worked closest to her would later speak in hushed tones about the contradiction, about how the lights in her dressing room would stay on until dawn, how she'd arrive on set after a sleepless night, trembling from pills meant to help but never quite managing to, how she'd sit before the mirror for hours, staring at her own reflection, as if trying to recognize the stranger looking back. She used to say she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. One makeup artist would recall years later, voice soft with old sorrow, like she was watching herself from somewhere far away. The studio executives saw her as property, valuable, yes, but ultimately expendable. They controlled her contracts, her image, her schedule. They selected her roles, approved her relationships, managed her public appearances. They had made her, they reminded her constantly, and they could unmake her just as easily. But what they couldn't control, what drove them to distraction, was what happened in those unguarded moments. The late-night phone calls to numbers they didn't recognize, the visitors who came and went through back doors, the way she'd disappear for hours, unreachable, returning with that distant look in her eyes. Some say she kept a diary during this period, leather-bound and hidden, filled with observations about the people who surrounded her, names of politicians, producers, connected men who moved through Hollywood's upper echelons, like sharks in glittering waters. If such a diary existed, it never surfaced, but the rumors of its existence alone were enough to make certain powerful people very nervous. The pressure was constant, suffocating. Every smile had to be perfect, every word calculated, every relationship approved or forbidden, based on how it might affect her marketability. She was the studio's most valuable asset, and they guarded her and controlled her accordingly. It was in this gilded cage that she began to change, to push back in small, dangerous ways, to seek out connections the studios couldn't control or monitor, to trust people she wasn't supposed to trust, to ask questions she wasn't supposed to ask. And it was in this climate of control and rebellion that the visitor first appeared in her life. The relationship, if it could be called that, began not with romance, but with information. According to those who claimed to have glimpsed fragments of the truth, the visitor was someone connected to a world parallel to Hollywood, but separate from it, a world of political power, government influence, and dangerous knowledge. Someone who moved in circles where secrets weren't just currency, but weapons. Their first meeting, some say, occurred at a party in the hills, One of those gatherings where Hollywood glamour mixed with political ambition, where champagne flowed, and conversations were had in corners, away from prying eyes and ears. She had been standing alone on a terrace, looking out over the city lights, when they approached. "You should be careful," the visitor had said, not as a threat, but as genuine warning. "There are people paying attention to you, not the fans, not the press, different people." She had turned, studied this stranger's face in the soft glow of the patio lights. "I'm always careful," she'd replied, though even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. "No," the visitor had said quietly, "you're not." What followed was a relationship built on secrets, shared in darkness. Late-night visits to her home, always unannounced, always after midnight, conversations that would stretch until dawn, about things that frightened her, about surveillance, about who might be listening to her phone calls, about the interests that powerful men had in keeping certain information buried. The visitor brought documents, sometimes photocopied pages, classified materials that shouldn't have been outside secure facilities, evidence of things that made her understand just how little control she actually had over her own life, how extensively she'd been watched, how carefully her every move had been documented. "They're building files on everyone," the visitor told her one night, sitting in her darkened living room, cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling. "Everyone who might become a problem, everyone who knows too much or asks too many questions. You're in there. Have been for years." She had laughed at that, though the sound came out hollow. "What could I possibly know that matters?" "More than you think," came the reply. "You've been close to people, important people. People who talk too freely when they think they're among friends, when they think they're safe." The implication hung in the air like smoke. She was being watched not just for what she did, but for what she might reveal about others. This knowledge changed her, made her see the world differently. Every phone call might be recorded. Every room might be bugged. Every friendly face might be gathering intelligence. The paranoia that others would later dismiss as symptoms of instability. Wasn't it possible that at least some of it was rational? That she had good reason to feel watched, followed, threatened? The visitor became her confidant in a way no one else could. Because unlike her friends in Hollywood, unlike her lovers and hangers-on, this person seemed to expect nothing from her. Didn't want her beauty, or her fame, or her body. Only wanted her to understand what was really happening in the shadows around her. But knowledge, she was learning, came with a price. The studio executives began to notice changes in her behavior. She became more difficult, more demanding. She questioned scripts, challenged directors, pushed back against the machinery that had always run so smoothly. When they tried to pressure her, she'd hint at things she knew, not directly. Never directly, but enough to make them nervous. She started playing a dangerous game, a former studio executive would admit decades later, speaking on condition of anonymity, acting like she had leverage, like she knew things. In that business, in that town, at that time, that was not a safe position to take. The late-night visits continued, but they took on a different quality. More urgent, more frightened. The visitor would arrive with new warnings, new documents, new evidence of the web that was tightening around both of them. "You need to stop," the visitor told her one night, pacing her living room, while she sat curled on the couch, watching. "Stop pushing. Stop asking questions. They're getting nervous. And when they get nervous, people get hurt." "I can't stop," she'd said softly. "Not now, not after everything I know." It was around this time that the phone calls started. Hang-ups in the middle of the night. Heavy breathing, then silence, sometimes a voice muffled and distorted, delivering cryptic warnings. "Stay quiet. Remember what happened to the others. You're being watched." She changed her phone number 3 times. The calls always found her. Her doctor would later report that she became increasingly agitated during this period, sleeping less, relying more heavily on medication to get through the days and nights. But when pressed, when asked what was wrong, she'd never say, just shake her head, light another cigarette, stare out windows at the California sunshine that suddenly seemed less bright than it used to. The visitor brought devastating news one evening in late spring. An operation was being planned, something to discredit her, to make anything she might say seem like the ravings of an unstable mind. They had her medical records, her prescription history, they knew about her struggles. They would use it all against her if necessary. "They're going to destroy you," the visitor said, and for the first time she heard real emotion in that usually controlled voice. Fear, maybe even grief. Not violently, not obviously, but they'll make sure nobody believes you, nobody trusts you, nobody takes you serious. She had nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Then I need to get everything out first. Everything I know. Before they can stop me." "That's suicide," the visitor had said flatly. "Maybe," she'd agreed. "But staying silent is death too. Just slow." The night of the knock on the door, that midnight visitation that would become the subject of whispered speculation for decades, came during what insiders would later call her most dangerous period. She had been making plans, reaching out to journalists, collecting her own documentation, preparing to speak truths that powerful people had assumed would stay buried forever. The visitor arrived that night, not with documents or warnings, but with something else. A choice, an ultimatum delivered by someone who, despite everything, seemed to genuinely care about what happened to her. They sat together in her living room, the curtains drawn, only a single lamp casting its soft glow over the scene. She listened as the visitor laid out the reality of her situation, with brutal clarity. She could continue down the path she was on, speaking out, exposing secrets, fighting back against the machinery of Hollywood and the powers that controlled it. But that path, the visitor explained, led nowhere good. Too many people had too much to lose, too many powerful interests would align against her. She would be discredited, marginalized, possibly worse. Her legacy would become a cautionary tale about the dangers of fame and instability. Or she could step back, accept certain realities, live the rest of her life as carefully as possible, keeping her knowledge to herself, surviving as best she could within the system that both created and contained her. "They'll let you live," the visitor said quietly. "As long as you stay quiet, as long as you play along, they'll give you that much." She had looked at this person, who had become, in a strange way, the only truly honest presence in her life. "And what about you?" she'd asked. "What happens to you after tonight?" The visitor's smile was sad. "I disappear, like I was never here, like these conversations never happened. You'll never see me again." "Why?" Her voice broke on the word. "Why help me at all then? Why tell me any of this if I'm supposed to just forget?" "Because you deserve to know the truth," the visitor said. "Even if knowing it doesn't set you free, even if it only makes the cage more visible, you deserved that much." They sat in silence for a long moment, two people caught in currents far stronger than themselves, making impossible choices, in the dead of night while the rest of Los Angeles slept. What she decided in that moment, no one can say with certainty. The visitor left before dawn, and according to those who pieced together fragments of that night's events from whispered accounts and veiled references, the two never met again. Whether she heeded the warning or continued her dangerous course remained ambiguous. Her behavior in the following weeks gave fuel to both interpretations. But something had shifted that night, something fundamental. Those close to her in the time that remained noticed a new quality to her sadness, a resignation mixed with defiance. As if she'd accepted certain limits, while simultaneously refusing to be entirely contained by them. She continued to work, to appear in public, to play the role Hollywood demanded, but there were moments caught, sometimes in photographs, occasionally glimpsed by those who paid attention, when you could see it. The knowledge behind her eyes, the weight of secrets kept and truths unspoken, the understanding of just how much control she'd never really had, and how little power even that understanding gave her. The visitor's prediction about how her story would be told proved prescient. When the end came, the narrative that emerged was exactly what had been warned about: instability, addiction, tragedy, but nothing about power, surveillance, or secrets too dangerous to speak. The documents the visitor had brought, if they ever existed, never surfaced. The conversations in darkened rooms became the stuff of conspiracy theories, easily dismissed by serious people who didn't want to believe the world worked that way. But late at night, in certain Hollywood circles where old memories lingered, people still wondered. They wondered about the visitor, who they really were, what agency or interest they represented, whether they'd acted out of compassion or calculation. They wondered about that final midnight conversation, about what choices were really offered, and what decisions were really made. Most of all, they wondered about the secrets that died with her, the knowledge she took to her grave, the truths that powerful people had been so desperate to keep buried, that they'd sent someone in the darkness, to ensure her silence, whether through warning or threat. No one could say for certain. The studio system that had created and controlled her eventually crumbled. The men who'd held power over her lived out their lives and passed into history. The political figures she'd known faded from prominence. The whole machinery of Golden Age Hollywood transformed into something else, something more modern, but no less ruthless. But the questions remained sought, perhaps unanswerable. Who was the visitor? What did they really want? What documents did they bring, and where are they now? What secrets died in that bungalow in Brentwood? And perhaps most haunting of all, if she'd made different choices that night, if she'd taken a different path after that final warning, would anything have changed? Or was her fate already written, the ending already decided by forces far beyond her control? In the end, she remains what she's always been, a mirror reflecting our own assumptions and fears about power, beauty, vulnerability, and truth. We project onto her life our own theories about how the world works, about what happens to those who know too much, or shine too brightly, or refuse to play by rules they never agreed to. The visitor too remains a shadow, a room, a late-night knock on a door that may or may not have happened exactly as whispered, but the story persists because it feels true in the way that facts sometimes don't. It feels like the kind of thing that would happen in a world where beauty is currency, where knowledge is danger, and where the machinery of power operates best in darkness. Somewhere in the archives of agencies that don't officially acknowledge their own history, there may be documents detailing surveillance operations, contact reports, assessments of risk. Or perhaps there's nothing, perhaps it was always just paranoia, just the isolated fears of someone under too much pressure with too few real allies. We'll never know for certain. That's the nature of secrets. That's the legacy of Hollywood's golden age, so much beauty, so much glamour, and underneath it all, so much darkness, we'll never fully see. The lamp burns low in the empty bungalow, the door closes on the departing visitor. The night keeps its secret, and we're left in the darkness, wondering.